Enjoy early access to ad-free episodes each week when you subscribe to Wedding Planning Podcast Premium in Apple Podcasts. Enjoy the show. Why, hello there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Wedding Planning Podcast, where we are doing a wedding Q&A. I absolutely love these shows. I love to hear from you, and we have a lot of really good questions. So let's get right into it. First up, communication with my fiance about the wedding has been really frustrating recently. We can't seem to agree on anything regarding our budget, who to invite, or our priorities, and he never seems excited or even interested to talk about it. What are some ways that we can get back on the same page where we can both enjoy the process and have some compromise? This is a really full, really heavy question that comes packed with a lot of really important issues that undoubtedly are not always fun to talk about, but I'm going to put on my coaching hat and I'm going to walk through kind of some individual issues that come up within this question one by one. So here we go. I have personally been married for 14 years now, which is a really long time. And I regularly find myself in situations with my husband, even 14 years later, where I feel like we still don't always respect one another's communication style. And what I mean by that is there are certain times of my day when I just would prefer not to discuss certain topics. So for example, if I am relaxing over coffee in the morning and getting my day started by checking work emails and kind of laying out an action plan for my coming work day, that is not necessarily the best time to approach me and talk about what we should do for a dinner plan for the week or who's going to drive our kids to what activity. It doesn't flow with the mental space that I am in that moment. So to kind of lay that over your question and the frustration that you're having with your fiance, I would suggest that both of you are really aware of when is a good time to talk about a certain topic. Take some time and really stop and think about within yourself, and then also by all means ask him outright, when would be a good time for us to sit down and discuss wedding plans? Is it over the weekend, we go out for happy hour and we sit and have a couple beers and talk about it at the bar? Is it talking about it on a Saturday morning over coffee? Is it a weeknight after work where the two of you go out to dinner and just create an environment that's relaxed and free from other distractions? The best way to set yourself up for success in terms of having a conversation that both parties might not be super excited about having, which it sounds like you're having a little trouble getting on the same level of excitement with him about the wedding plans. That's a different, sorry, I'm going off topic there. That's something we'll address in just a moment. But the way to set yourselves up for success in addressing wedding plans is to choose a time that both of you agree is going to be a beneficial time where you're both willing to clear your minds of other distractions and just have a really focused conversation. So you can't be bringing it up willy-nilly every time you pass each other in the house while you're both getting ready for work. That's probably not going to be an ideal time. And I will say in closing on that first point, I don't mean to sound like I'm laying blame on you for choosing the wrong time. This is a two-sided issue and it's going to require a two-sided cooperation to come to a satisfactory middle ground. And that kind of leads us into another part of your question, which is asking how you can get on the same page where you're both enjoying the process of planning your wedding and come to some compromises. You mentioned that you can't seem to agree on anything about your budget, about who to invite, or about what your priorities are. And this is not an easy thing to address, but just stop and think the wedding that you're planning is for both of you. And if you're sensing a lack of compromise on your partner's side, I can pretty much guarantee that they are probably feeling the exact same way in some way, shape, or form about you and your actions. So by stepping outside of yourself and deliberately seeing the situation from your partner's point of view, that can be a really transformative way to kind of clear the air and begin to smooth things over. There are always going to be things that are really important to you and are not really important to your fiance, and vice versa. And in wedding planning, that comes up all the time. That's totally normal. I don't know of any fantasy situation where two people see perfectly eye to eye on all of their priorities and never have to make any compromises. That's just not realistic, and that doesn't exist. And as someone who has been married for 14 years, I can say that in my life experience up to this point, compromising gracefully with a smile on your face, even when it's not your preferred outcome, that's literally the definition of compromise. So by doing that gracefully, it's an essential part of any healthy, loving relationship. And that really does start now during your engagement. And to wrap this whole very long-winded answer up, I will say that what you're experiencing is a completely normal part of the engagement process, and it's a completely normal part of having a relationship with another human. These are really difficult topics, and they're not easy conversations to have, but it's a natural part of the ongoing process of just getting to know someone and getting more comfortable with the best ways to communicate and the best ways to support one another. This is not a journey that has like an endpoint. Once you're married, you magically know how to communicate with each other and how to compromise perfectly. That doesn't exist. It's an ongoing, constantly evolving journey, and feeling frustration over that, especially during your engagement, which is a really busy time in your lives, that is very normal. Okay, we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about evaluating the pros and cons of a venue with more or less DIY elements involved. So the scenario that I'm going to nutshell for you is that the listener's fiance's mom and dad own a property that they can use for their wedding, but there has never been a wedding hosted there before, so it's literally just a blank piece of property. It does not come with an event staff. It does not come with catering equipment. It does not come with tables and chairs. This question is really popular because a lot of us want to create a wedding that is super unique and really personalized, and a blank space venue is a great way to do that. And B, it's popular because on the surface, when you have a venue available to you that you do not need to invest any money in, that is really attractive. So I'm really glad to talk this through, and it's a topic again that comes up again and again on the podcast. This is a common pitfall that couples can fall into as they're in the wedding vision phase of planning. So longtime listeners of the show, you probably remember an episode that's titled "When Trying to Save Money Backfires." And that aired back in January of 2024, if you want to go back and have a listen. But that's the first show that comes to my mind when I hear this question and this situation. So how I approach this question is in two parts. And the first part is asking, are you attracted to using this property as a way to potentially save money? Or are you considering getting married on the property because you actually love the property and celebrating your wedding there would hold a ton of sentimental and emotional value to you and your family? Depending on your answer to those two questions, we can go in two different directions. So if you are considering using this property to potentially save money and you're seeing it as a free venue, and I'm using air quotes around the word free, then you're going to need to have a very realistic look at everything that you will need to do, rent, buy, set up to make that space usable for your wedding celebration. A empty barn is not going to magically transform into a wedding venue. There is so much behind the scenes work, time, and money that goes into transforming a space. So depending on your answer to that question, we can go two different routes from there. On the other hand, if you're doing it for sentimental reasons and it would be meaningful to get married on a family property, then there are endless ways that we can approach transforming that space into a magical wedding experience for you, your friends, and your families. Most couples who do commit to using a blank space for their venue, not all, but most, they wind up over budget and spinning their wheels trying to execute what are, at the end of the day, just unrealistic scenarios. So again, to repeat something I said a minute ago, that venue is not actually free. I know you might not need to sign a contract and write a check for $5,000 to rent it for the day, but it's anything but free. If you're considering a blank space venue that's going to require you to execute on a million different moving parts, that is a great example of a really complicated question with huge stakes. And it's something that I address pretty frequently in wedding strategy calls that I offer to listeners. So these calls are available each month. I release a handful. I only have so much time, so I cannot offer an unlimited amount of them. But we meet via Zoom for 30 minutes and review your specific wedding situation, your questions, and we get you set up for all your next steps in 30 minutes. So if that is something that is interesting to you as you're working through your wedding vision, as you're wondering if a blank slate venue makes sense, I will put a link in the show notes with more details for booking a time slot. And you can also visit weddingplanningpodcast.co and look for the Work With Me tab to get all the information on how to book a call. Susan's Travel Services is so excited to partner with you to plan your honeymoon, destination wedding, or maybe even your bachelor or bachelorette party. Susan and her team have been planning dream vacations for 27 years, and they are truly the best in the business for start to finish planning services. Travel and new experiences are incredibly special to me, and Susan and her team have helped me plan some unforgettable vacations, including a bachelorette party in Cabo and a family anniversary celebration in Cancun. They meticulously researched the best all-inclusive options for us based on some very specific priorities, and the professional assistance in choosing location, resort, activities, and transportation was absolutely priceless. From all-inclusive resorts in Mexico and the Caribbean, overwater bungalows in the Maldives, or that African safari that you've always dreamed of, save yourself hours of research and guesswork and let Susan and her team find you the best options for a once-in-a-lifetime vacation. Reach out to Susan and her team today by emailing info@susanstravelservices.com. And be sure to let her know that I sent you and get $50 off your final booking or $200 off your destination wedding. Her email one more time is info@susanstravelservices.com. Next question. This kind of echoes the first one a little bit. My fiance and I have totally different visions for how to stock our own bar. He wants to recreate a top shelf bar situation with all the liquors and mixers available to our guests. And I see more of a simplistic setup of beer, wine, and maybe a signature cocktail. What are your thoughts? Heaven knows I love talking about cocktails, so I love this question. It's a big topic, and I have a lot of really detailed information and experience in setting up bars, but we're going to go ahead and nutshell this answer just to get you started. So I will say it's not my style to tell you how you should or shouldn't do anything regarding your wedding. And sneak peek, we're going to go much deeper into that next week. But to approach this bar setup question, I'm going to approach it backward. And I'm going to offer you a list of the top mistakes that I see couples make over and over again as they are setting up their own bar. And then from those mistakes, I'll let you take it from there and do the opposite. So mistake number one is that couples offer too many options. And yes, you can pass this part along to your fiance and have him listen in for himself. It's expensive to offer all the options. There's a ton of waste, and there is simply too much guesswork in trying to gauge how much of what everyone will want to drink. The fewer the options, the more control you have. I would highly recommend to keep it simple. Mistake number two, so easy to miscalculate how much ice, how many cups, and how much mixers you are going to need to execute on a full service style bar. Mistake number three is people do not factor in the children or the non-alcohol drinkers at the wedding. You would be absolutely amazed at how much Sprite and Coke a bunch of 8 to 14-year-old kids can throw back when their parents are distracted and not paying any attention. And yes, I have a lot of personal experience with this. If the kids drink all of your Coke, then guess what? There's none left for mixed drinks. And I'll also include here, in addition to soda drinkers, another mistake is not providing enough water and just not enough non-alcoholic options overall for the adults. Everyone is going to need at minimum 1 to 2 bottles of water throughout that night. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Mistake number 4, this can be catastrophic, and that is not maintaining proper control over pour sizes, quantities, and extra inventory. This failure to plan properly can result in very drunk guests, which is never a good thing. It also results in running out of things and just a general sense of chaos. If you know you have 2 cases of wine hiding somewhere, but nobody can find them, that's not going to benefit you. You're just going to be stuck with 24 unopened bottles of wine the next day, which actually might not be a horrible thing. Anyway, it's important that you have experienced serving staff who are pouring correctly and not resulting in 100 very intoxicated people at 10 o'clock at night. And then our final mistake that I would love to review here is trying to please everyone almost always backfires. This goes back to mistake number 1, how I opened the answer. Too many options. It never works. It creates added stress, added expense, and it never comes out the way you intend. So I would advise that you do yourselves a favor and just keep things simple. There is a ton of opportunity for huge savings in stocking your own bar, and hopefully these mistakes that I've highlighted get you pointed in the right direction for a successful experience. Next question, what's an ideal time for our ceremony? Our church is offering a 2 p.m. or a 5 p.m. time slot. It is very important that we get married there, so switching venues is not an option. Great timeline related question, and 2 really different time slots that are really going to set the tone for your overall wedding day. So very important that we're thoughtful about this. For a really straightforward and simple answer, I would personally lean towards 2 p.m. so that your evening isn't really jammed and rushed, but that's assuming that you're having an evening reception, which I do not know that you plan to do. So without much background information, I would sketch out a draft of your wedding day timeline, and you can refer to our recent timeline mistakes episode that you'll find back in previous shows. And then based on that, take a look at how your wedding day plays out with a 2 p.m. versus a 5 p.m. ceremony time, and then make your decision from there. I don't have a lot of information on, again, what type of reception you're planning on doing, where the locations are. So it's hard for me to outline many specifics in terms of the timeline, but you can do a scenario A and a scenario B, and you should have a pretty clear picture of which one is going to work better for the two of you. And last question for the day, we're having trouble conceptualizing our reception layout. We booked an outdoor space at our favorite local brewery that gives us a lot of flexibility, but I'm stuck imagining how all the tables and the dance floor will look within the space. Do you have any tips for how to go about planning the layout of tables and dance floor? Great question. I would start by asking the events manager what they suggest in terms of setting up your tables and a dancing area. They have likely seen dozens of events play out in that space, and they should have some good advice that you can use as a starting point. So in other words, do they have ideas based on previous events, or maybe they have photos of past events and weddings that have been hosted there that can give you some inspiration and kind of a starting point? Also, the size and the shape of the tables that are available to you is going to play a major factor in how things should be set up. And that's in addition to the number of guests that you'll be having. And that's going to dictate the amount of space necessary for a dance floor area if you plan on having dancing. And as a side note, completely unrelated, but I have to throw it in because it's a gem. Actual dance floor rentals are really, really expensive. This is a popular sticker shock item that couples are just taken aback by how expensive it is to rent an actual dance floor. So given your venue, that may not even be necessary to actually rent a dance floor, but you will still need to plan for open space if you do plan to host music and dancing. So that's going to need to be factored into your layout. Back to the tables and kind of the overall layout, things to keep in mind are having enough space for people to comfortably move about in between tables. You're going to need to leave walkways open so that people can enter and exit the space, room to access the bars, room to access the dance floor. And another angle is to consider the intimacy and the kind of guest experience that different table configurations do provide. So in other words, long banquet style tables and seating are really popular, but that I'm not a huge fan because that really restricts who you're able to interact with during the meal. So basically it's the people on either side of you and then maybe the one or two people across the table from you, but that depends on table decorations, because if you have big centerpieces lining down the middle, you're not even going to be able to interact with the people across from you. Circular tables of either 8 to 10 people, that provides a nice atmosphere for a group of people to have conversation and good interaction with one another. And then the last suggestion, if 4-top square tables are an option, we did this at our wedding in addition to some bigger 8-top circular tables. And it was a really, really fun way to seat 2 couples together, or some of the 4-tops were just 4 close friends. And it created a really cozy dinner atmosphere that was just super conducive to people having meaningful conversation and just a really meaningful connection point over dinner. Especially for older guests, it's also much easier to keep up with a conversation when you're dealing with 4 people at the table than it is across a 10-top circular table where there are multiple conversations flying back and forth between 10 people. So a mix of bigger circular and smaller 4-tops may be a great solution for you. And then a bonus point for mixing both is that mixing the sizes also gives you some added flexibility in terms of the overall floor plan. Okay, that wraps it up for this week. Next week on the Wedding Planning Podcast, we are going to explore A variety of creative situations where listeners have presented a really fun vision for their wedding, and they follow it up with, is this just a really stupid idea, or is this even possible? We're going to walk through a few scenarios. We'll assess the feasibility scale. We'll talk about the potential downsides. And I'm going to share a formula that you can use to check your ideas against so that you don't bite off more than you can chew. Thank you so much for spending this time with me here this week. I am thinking of you and sending my best wishes to you, your fiance, your families, and all of your loved ones. You can visit our website to claim your free engagement starter kit. You can also sign up for weekly email show recaps. You can submit your wedding questions, and you can also view a list of all past episodes. That's all on our website, weddingplanningpodcast.co. If you're loving the podcast, I would love to see a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen. It really helps the show, and I appreciate you taking the minute to do that so very much. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll meet again next week, same time, same place.